One of the criticisms that I get most often about reading through the Bible in a plan kind of like ours is that the Bible is boring. Now, the truth is that those who make that criticism either don't fully understand the story and everything involved, or really haven't tried to read more than maybe just a day or two, because there is really no section of the Bible that could be deemed as boring. And not just because of spiritual interpretations and because of debates and arguments that people have, but honestly because the stories themselves are fascinating. In fact, the passage that you're going to read today, Genesis 27, 28, and 29, is just that, fascinating. It is, in my opinion, one of the key passages that relate to the prophecy of Jesus Christ coming through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But also, it's one that's filled with family drama. It could be its own soap opera if you're into those sorts of things. We find in Genesis 27 this continued sibling rivalry between Jacob and Esau, where Jacob will, by the hand of his mother and by the deceit and craftiness of his mother, attempt to and succeed in stealing not only the birthright from Esau, but the blessing from Isaac. And then we see that because of this, the strife, the sibling rivalry between Esau and Jacob causes Jacob to leave. And we see his interaction with a man named Laban, his uncle, and Jacob's attempt to marry Rachel, where he actually marries Leah first and then marries Rachel. And we see all of this family drama. And there are a lot of spiritual things we can pull from this, a lot of prophetic things we can look at, especially about Jesus Christ. What I want to do is I want to take you to two verses mainly, and then kind of give you just my heart as I read this today and studied this, some things that I was reminded of. Genesis chapter 29. Verse 13, listen to this. This is after Jacob has stolen the blessing and he has left for his own protection to go to Laban, his uncle. And look at verse 13. It says, let's back up to verse 12. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. So when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he related to Laban all these things. And listen to what Laban says. Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. What we find, he's actually going to stay longer than that, but what we find is this introduction, this greeting of generosity and love. He says, "You are my bone and my flesh." But does this necessarily show the true heart of Laban in this situation? Does this statement reveal the heart of Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, Esau, even later Rachel? I don't think it necessarily does. And I do believe, as I was reading today, that there are many times that the greetings of certain individuals do not represent the character. Or if I can put it another way, the introductions do not necessarily represent integrity. As I was praying about this passage, my mind went to many times where I've met someone. And the saying is true, you can't judge a book by its cover. And sometimes that means that you may see something you don't like, but if you get to know the person, then you realize you were mistaken, that it's actually, there's actually a great friendship that can arise from that. But the opposite is always true. Sometimes you are introduced to people that you trust, that you, even in church work, that you believe have a certain type of character, and yet that introduction did not reveal the integrity. What do you do in these moments? What do we do in this passage especially? So consider all of what you're reading today. Jacob's deceit and treachery, Rebekah's deceit and treachery, Isaac's deceit and treachery, Esau's deceit and treachery, all of this going on. You say, well, so we can't really trust Laban even. We can't really trust any of the characters because they're not perfect. That's one thing I want you to be reminded of, is that they are not the heroes of the story. We usually want to find the hero. We want to find the person we can put on the pedestal. And as you read the Bible, remember, God is the hero. Jesus Christ is the hero. Even if a book is named after a certain individual, like we saw in the book of Job, Job is not the hero of the story. So what do we find in this passage, in these chapters? We are reminded the reason that they're in there for us, many reasons, but I want to give you 3 reminders this morning. Number 1, because it shows us the literary and historical accuracy by not shying away from mistakes and failures and deceitful characters. You see, if you're writing a story, usually the temptation is to really beef up your characters in a sense, ethically or morally, to show them that they have no flaws. But the Bible does not shy away from the negative aspects, even of Abraham. We saw Abraham and his lies, and Isaac, and we see even Isaac, how he treats his sons, and Esau and Jacob, how they are at war with one another. We see even Rebekah, how she deceives. And yes, there are justifications for this. There's no doubt that Isaac was against God in trying to give this blessing to Esau. There's no doubt that Rebekah, even though she knew the prophecy, even though she knew the younger brother or the older brother would serve the younger, she tried to take that in her own hands. There's no doubt that Jacob sinned by deceiving his father. And yet, if we were trying to produce a work, a literary work, we would want to change some of these details, because we would not want the founders of a nation or religious, not just Judaism, but of Christianity, to be linked to these atrocities or this sin. And yet we do not change the past and do not change the details of the past or the facts of the past just because we don't like them. It is, in fact, the sin of the past characters, the sin of those who helped to start this nation, that shows us the contrast between the salvation in Jesus Christ. We'll talk about that at the end. But so this is included. And as you read, I want you to mark, I want you to underline every time you see the failure of an individual, that we rejoice in the faithfulness of our God. That Jacob is not kicked out or not rejected, even though he sins. He's a trickster, he's a deceiver, but God still uses him. And we'll see as we read through Genesis that God can redeem and restore. And so literary and historical accuracy is seen by the author not shying away from failures and mistakes. Second, I hope that we're encouraged by trusting in the power of God, not in the plans of man. Now, I've mentioned this over and over, that when you read the book of Genesis, you see how people try to take matters into their own hands. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob tried to take matters in their own hands. Rebekah, in this story, she goes to her son and says, hey, Esau's about to give the blessing to, Isaac's about to give the blessing to Esau, sorry. She goes to Jacob and says, get in there. I'll fix the meal. I'll dress you up. And so we see deceit. And we are tempted even today. What we can learn from this, we are tempted that we want to take things into our own hands. We want to take things into our own abilities. And we war against God when we try to do that. So may we trust the power of God, not the plans of man. Finally, we hopefully see the majesty of Jesus Christ as perfection, that he is above, far superior to Abraham, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, even Laban. Notice again this introduction. It says Laban kissed him and brought him to his house, and Jacob tells Laban all these things, and then Laban says, surely you are my bone and my flesh. There is this introduction of goodwill, and yet we're going to see in the next few chapters that Jacob is tricked by Laban. Therefore, Jacob and Rachel trick Laban. There is this infighting. I told you, this drama that doesn't make it boring. This infighting, this strife. And because one abuses the other then retaliates in revenge. Our God does not do that. Our God is far above. He is patient and kind and compassionate, long-suffering. Jesus Christ is perfection. We do not put our hope in Jacob. We do not put our hope in Laban. And today, you may be struggling because you've put your hope in somebody. You've put your hope in things. You've put your hope in maybe even the church. And you've said, I've been burned. I've been hurt. Let me encourage you today, even based on our reading. People will hurt you. And hurt people hurt people. And while that's a cliche and said many times, it doesn't make it any less true, is that when we put our hope and trust in people apart from Jesus Christ in them, we will be hurt. And yet, don't let it make you bitter. Don't let it make you callous. Don't let it make you walk in this numb isolation that says you don't want to give your life or risk anymore. But walk in Christ, lean into Christ, learn from Christ and love Christ. And in doing so, God will put you with people who love Him too. And we are not perfect people. The gospel, the beauty of the gospel is God taking imperfect people and putting us together and molding us and recreating us. So today, I love you. I'm praying for you. Walk with Christ. Walk with me. Stakes in the ground.